Americans living with hemophilia. Today, half of them, 10,000 people, are infected with the AIDS virus or already dead from it. How did it happen? In the early 80s, the medicine hemophiliacs took intravenously to clot their blood was contaminated with HIV. The drug companies that manufacture that medicine called clotting factor, which is made with plasma from blood donors, have always maintained it's a tragedy they couldn't have foreseen. But lawyers for hemophiliacs say not so, that internal documents and depositions from 3 of the 4 manufacturers show that by mid-82, as the AIDS epidemic was taking off, companies should have known their product might be contaminated because they'd been making it with blood they should have known was dangerous, blood collected from the very donors most at risk for AIDS, promiscuous gay men.
The epidemic of AIDS in the hemophilia community was preventable.
In the early 80s, Dr. Don Francis was an epidemiologist at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, the federal agency responsible for investigating new diseases.
And obviously, if you asked anyone on the street, should you take the plasma from a gay man and put it into something that used for treatment of people, I don't think it would take a rocket scientist to say that you probably shouldn't use that material.
And if the drug companies had told you at the time that that is indeed what they were doing, using that plasma from gay men to make the clotting factor, what would your reaction have been?
It's almost crazy.
Simple as that. So why were the drug companies recruiting homosexual donors? Because gay men had just the kind of plasma they needed to make another medicine they sold, gamma globulin, a drug that's injected to prevent hepatitis B. At the time, Tom Dries was president of one of the drug companies, Alpha Therapeutic.
Gay donors were recruited specifically for one purpose, and that was that they had, generally, a high level of hepatitis. And we needed high-level or high-titer hepatitis plasma to make gamma globulin and to make hepatitis vaccines. So they were very necessary.
Were your competitors recruiting homosexual donors as well?
Oh, sure, sure.
So it was well known that to make certain products, you need certain plasma, and gay donors had it.
Right.
In the early 80s, in the midst of the gay sexual revolution, the majority of gay men living in big cities like San Francisco and New York had contracted hepatitis, a virus transmitted by sex and blood. So advertisements were placed in gay magazines urging men who'd had the virus to come in and sell their plasma because it was needed to help develop a hepatitis vaccine.
Now, the important point is that if you're recruiting gay donors for that purpose, that you not use the plasma from the gay donors for anti-hemophilic factor. That was very important.
According to Dries, FDA regulations at the time forbid using that blood with a history of hepatitis, except for products that required it. But at the time, the FDA never ordered them to stop using that blood. And today, the FDA says ongoing litigation prevents them from commenting on whether or not the drug companies violated their regulations.
They were supposed to be collecting this high-risk plasma and isolating it in the production process so it didn't get into the pools with the, quote, healthy and normal plasma. They put it all in the same pools.
Corey Dubin, a hemophiliac with AIDS and a leader in the battle against the drug companies, says this tragedy might never have happened if companies had followed the FDA's hepatitis regulations.
The very policies by which they were collecting plasma could only have resulted in this.
When AIDS happened in the early 80s, you didn't know at that time, the community didn't know at that time, that the companies were targeting that population most susceptible to AIDS.
That's right. We had no idea. We had no idea.
If you had known?
All hell would have broke loose.
Dubin says companies made clotting medicine with the plasma collected from gay men because once that blood was collected, it was cost-effective to get as many products out of it as they could. It was also cost-effective to make it in large batches that combine the blood of up to 20,000 donors.
That's the equivalent, essentially, of having sex with 10,000 people each time you use factor 8. Every time you took this material intravenously, this is not material you rubbed on your skin.